Hello and welcome back to the composition vlog. It's been about 3 weeks since I last filmed and it's been a very busy 3 weeks. We've had rehearsals, we've had our final gig of the season for Bastard Assignments. I've had 2 trips to Bath, and for 3 days last week I was at Tate Modern performing in Natasha and Joe Addison's Inventory of Behaviours. I just want to take a little moment to talk about that experience because it's a participatory artwork that looks at artist behaviours, which are basically the things that artists do when they are not making art. And in the process of performing some of these things, it really made me realise that in this vlog I don't ever talk about that stuff. I mean, yes, these things are quite long enough already. You do not need to know how many cups of tea or coffee I drink in a day. But at the same time, I think it's worth acknowledging that there are these kind of peripheral activities which are part of the process, but don't actually look like working. So I performed a range of these instructions, well, scores really, that they'd had contributed by artists describing things that they do. And so I spent sort of 3 days drinking cups of tea. At one stage I was thinking about dancing with my materials, writing endless to-do lists, and at one point I got to cry in a corner.
After the 5 or 6 minutes, blink your eyes vigorously and return to your initial upright position, relaxing your facial muscles as much as possible. 5. Repeat action.
Yeah, I had a marvellous time. It was really good for my research too, and just, yeah, it just made me think a lot about these things, and I just wanted to put a little acknowledgement in here, but reassure you that I'm not about to start talking about all the minutiae of everything and making every episode 3 hours long. So over these 3 weeks, the main thing I've been doing is getting POV ready to be displayed at that final Bastard Assignments gig. Last time I was talking about how I was considering getting the images printed. I spent a lot of time sort of selecting images and trying to come up with kind of a coherent set that represented all the cameras and gave an indication of the varying styles, was the sort of the right size for the space but still affordable to print, and basically the more work I did on it, the more the selection just felt fragmented and like it wasn't really conveying anything. I had a really good discussion with my supervisors, which went a long way towards sort of sorting out the mess in my brain, which did finally lead to me rejecting the idea of printing and settling on a video format to be projected in this little ante-room at block 336. The discussion included a comment about thinking about the pacing of what at the time was being discussed as a slideshow, and I realised that Tim had taken so many photos because he'd in both performances he'd had a really good camera that responded very, very fast, and what that effectively resulted in was a kind of jerky stop-motion animation. And so basically I've assembled all the photos with sort of Tim's part as a base, with the other slower cameras sort of dropping in images here and there, which sometimes kind of go together in a clear sequence and sometimes are just individual shots. But so there's different pacing between the parts, and it all kind of comes together, hopefully, in a fairly coherent whole with different sort of, yeah, it's kind of different characters to different parts. And this solved a technical problem that I was facing with the printing idea, which was that one of the cameras, the Canon G11, is a much lower resolution camera than the others, and I wouldn't have been able to get the quality of the prints, even printing them quite small, that I'd be able to get from the other cameras, and I was disturbed by that because it just wouldn't have looked very good, and it felt like, well, I could take it out and only use the good quality images, but that kind of felt like taking one voice out of a chorale, really. It's 4 cameras, it's not sort of only the good ones. So it was really nice to be able to keep that material in, and yeah, Basically, the final version keeps almost all the material in, which is really nice. What I found after I started with the Asylum one and then I moved on to the Chicago version, and what I found from the Chicago version and then going back to the Asylum one was that in the Asylum one there were several images of the audience that were absolutely crystal clear. I mean, they're nice photos, but it felt really out of place, and actually it was much more effective if things were a bit less clear. So where they seem to disrupt the rhythm of the whole thing, those have been removed. And so the only images that have really been removed from the Asylum one are because they felt jarring and like they disrupted the whole piece. For Floodhouse, Tim's camera was so good that he ended up with about 500 photographs for the performance, compared to I think it was about 200 for the Asylum one, and it was just overwhelming, the number of pictures to deal with. I think what I probably should have done was to just make the duration of each one shorter and have a smoother kind of animation, and I may go back and do that, but the way I dealt with it to sort of try and replicate the rhythms of the Asylum version was to actually just take out every second image. It does kind of work, but I do feel that with the longer duration it does get quite choppy and there's quite a lot of camera movement anyway, and yeah, I think there is a risk of slight motion sickness perhaps. So I may change that, but they're both online. They're linked below. I'm also putting a link in again to the performance video of Aide Memoir, because I think looking at the performance in Asylum documentation and POV for that same performance, it really does give a different perspective on the piece, to be looking at the photos produced during it. And so I was really pleased with that aspect of it. The gig went well in the end. We were very pleased with it. I was really happy with the setup for POV in the ante-room. I thought it looked great. I completely failed to get a photograph of it, as did everybody else. So I don't have any kind of documentation of what that looked like. Sorry. I was, of course, rushing about doing stage management performance stuff the entire evening, and I think that was kind of a shame, because it would have been really nice to be able to be in the space with the work and talk to people about it. I don't really know how it was received. Yeah, it's very hard to tell because I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone about that. I think there's lessons learned there about how to deal with including visual pieces in what is basically a music event. So that was the main focus of the past few weeks. The Britten Variations stalled a little bit simply because I was just out and about so much. I took delivery of a proper green screen, which I've now set up in the studio, and it's been sort of stretched to get the creases out. The next step is to make some tests with it and see if what I was thinking of for that is actually going to work. To some extent I've been deliberately not thinking about this piece. The reason for that being that the idea of this sort of confessional video concept that I mentioned last time, to be thinking out loud how I'm developing the piece, to be recording those ideas, it's, if I didn't have the green screen, and the green screen was how I wanted to process all of this, it felt like if I was sort of writing about and sort of coming up with other ideas, then I would either be sort of coming in halfway through with the video material, or I would end up having to go back and kind of pretend and just do like fake video, which is something I actually really hate. I really loathe sort of faking stuff for my pieces. So I don't know why I get so uptight about it, but yeah, I like things to be, if you're going to do a thing, I like it to be real as much as possible. So that's pretty much it. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, please leave them below, and I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for watching. Bye.